This episode is brought to you by Zarsaur Law. I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey, y'all, I'm Molly Barrows, and welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast. If you follow the show, then you know we cover some pretty scandalous crimes and cases that bubble up in Northwest Florida and beyond. And if you are new to the show, welcome. And we would just ask you to please like and subscribe. Pretty easy to do if those buttons are right there close to your fingertips. I'd like to introduce you to Pam Hill. She is our guest co-host as always. Really, you're just a permanent guest. Yeah. It's really our show. I think if I'm just going to be honest, if you've been here before, you know this is true. But if you're new,
we're
then
both here.
We're here all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so today
James.
with James. Oh my gosh, we couldn't be here without James. We thank him very much as well. But today's episode is an interesting one. I've only recently learned of this case, and there's so many cases that I think are so interesting. But really, when you dive into the Wayback Files, you're kind of like, holy cow, how did I miss this? You know?
Fraganacle BS from.
This is exactly some Fraganacle BS straight out of Texas, where they often manufacture Fraganacle BS. Same in Florida. I mean, thank goodness for the South. What would we talk about without it? But one of these days, we're going to go north of the Mason-Dixon line for more stories. That's for sure. Well, today's episode is called Good Old Bernie Tiede, Mortician Extraordinaire, made millions from makeup to murder. We're talking about the case of Bernie Tiede, a Texas mortician who shot his friend and companion, an 81-year-old woman named Marjorie Nugent. And this was in November of 1996. Y'all, he shot her 4 times in the back, then folded her body into a freezer and spent her money. She was a multimillionaire and heiress, really. Well, a widowed heiress. You'd have thought everybody in the small town would have been upset by his confession. Instead, they rallied around this guy. And he was even temporarily released on bail in 2014 pending a resentencing, but that ultimately landed him in prison for even longer than the first sentence he got. So the case did gain a lot of notoriety after the movie Bernie, which depicted his crime, and subsequent legal battles came out. So we're going to talk all about that today. And Pam, tell us, who is Bernie Tiede?
All right, we've got Bernie Tiede, and Bernie Tiede is a polite, likable young man, and there's even a movie about Bernie Tiede called Bernie, and let's go real quick here. Jack Black plays him, so does that tell you anything?
I know, and automatically when I hear that, I'm like, oh, I'm going to like him.
You are.
Because Jack Black's so likable, and of course I think of him in comedic roles,
right.
So I thought this ought to be kind of interesting when I've never seen it, so it ought to be interesting.
It's a dark comedy, and it's hard for me to think any of this is funny because it's not, but there are that genre. But Bernie Tiede, he was a likable guy. His dad, they're from the Ukraine. His dad and them, they immigrated over here, and his dad was a music professor and choir and all that, so artsy kind of guy. And Bernie and his family over here in Texas, okay, from the Ukraine to Texas, they landed right there. Well, Bernie's mama died when he was 2 in a car accident. Bernie's daddy was driving, and Bernie's daddy never forgave himself, so he turned to drinking. And then his daddy died when he was 15. So there was a lot of turmoil and stuff, but he still managed to be fun and likable. And he was a gay man, but he wasn't openly out, because think about this too. He was born in 1958. I was born in 1959. So the times that he was growing up in, nobody asked any questions. It wasn't necessarily don't ask, don't tell. It's like, can't you tell?
It's more like we don't care.
That's right.
But in the bad way.
Yeah.
Like we don't want to know because we're not going to be supportive of it regardless. We just don't want to know.
Well, you know what? It kind of bounced the other way. That's what I thought was different too. In Texas out there, in Carthage, Texas, they all loved him. They just didn't discuss it.
Right, that's right.
Because he was helpful, he was kind, he was loving, he was smart. He could do anything in the world. He could do hair and makeup and sing and dance and preach and do everything. And so they were like, Texas is a lot like Alabama, a lot like Florida. They're like, he made us look good, even better in death than we did alive, so we liked him.
Of course, I know. I totally.
Yeah.
I think I can relate to that in my own family in certain relations. There's things that you know about your family members, and you're like, well, we just don't talk about that.
That's right.
But we're all excited to have you in the room. You know.
Yeah. Well, that is politeness, and that goes a long way too, because you don't have to mix it up with everybody over everything. You got to throw rocks at every dog that barks. So they were talking about Bernie, that they liked him. Well, in high school, he was a lot of fun with his friends. He worked at the funeral home in his hometown there. And he would take his friends joyriding out in the hearse.
Oh my gosh.
They
that sounds pretty
too.
exciting.
Yeah.
People enjoyed him. They liked him being around despite these conservative viewpoints, if you will, towards homosexuality. And this was back in the 90s, and he was a youngish man in his 30s. So nobody was judging him. They just weren't openly talking about it.
Exactly. Well, and he made himself likable too. It was during the time of when people are grieving. That's a really hard time, and we're very vulnerable during grieving. And if somebody's nice or kind or helpful to us, we just see that person like a hero. And so he would help them with everything from picking out the caskets to planning the funerals. And if somebody said, oh, my singer can't come or something, he said, that's all right. I'll drop just as I am right in there for you.
Oh, wow.
And he could do all that stuff. And he could preach. And he could meet the people and keep it going. But what he did, the funeral home he worked at, Hawthorne Funeral Home in Carthage there, they had basically asked him to come be an assistant funeral director there. He knew how, he got them to take the stodgy conference room lookingness out of the funeral homes and put the sconce lighting and the candles and the soft colors and the sweet music and the fancy caskets and stuff. And he basically taught them how to what's called upsell.
That was smart.
Yes, it was, because during grieving, you will spend almost anything because you're hurting so much.
Yes.
And there's so much big decisions. So people would go in there and go, well, how much is this one? And he'd say, well, that's the economy version. Nobody wants that one. And then he goes, well, but we got this one over here. Look at this little drawer that comes out right here. You can probably put their little rings and stuff right there. Or, aren't you 6'5"? Well, this one's too short, but maybe we could just like push you in a little bit, and then people were like, no, I want the best one. So he basically, that funeral home people, they were looking back and going, man, he literally can do everything. Make folks that had wrinkles not have wrinkles, and he just could do it all. So everybody loved Bernie. And then what he would do after someone, especially the widows, after they had lost their husbands, and Marjorie Nugent, by the way, her husband was a banker and an oil man, so he was pretty wealthy. Well, Bernie would go, not just Marjorie, he would go to all their houses and have tea with them, because I think he was legitimately checking up on them. But you never know, someone that's so brilliant at the flex of selling and maybe basically self-absorbed can make it look like, I'm doing this for you.
Of course. Yeah. Because I was about to say, it is easy to take advantage of people when they're grieving, but you do want to honor your loved ones. And I have to say, when I buried both of my parents, the Pensacola funeral homes that I worked with, they made it so easy, and I was so grateful. But it would have been easy had I been dealing with somebody who wasn't being on the up and up. It might have been easy to talk me into just about anything. Really.
Oh, yeah. And words are important. We want the luxury package for our loved one, or we want the premier or what have you. I mean, I've already bought my land on scenic highway, I guess, my funeral burial plot.
That is important. Yeah. Side note, it is important, something to think about if you do, take care of your own business beforehand, because it takes some pressure off your loved ones.
It does. And that was one of the sweetest gifts my mom gave us. She planned her whole funeral and even paid for it and everything.
Wow.
So, I mean, everything, even to the wake, to paying for the food and this, that, and the other. And then our church took care of the rest. So it is such a hard time for people. But as human beings, it is one of the things that I think we appreciate the most. I know it's something that I can look back and go, this was some of the kindest people. But grief also can be difficult.
Oh my gosh, yes, as we know, and it can drive some people over the edge. So it seems as though that's how he developed his friendship with Marjorie,
Yes,
that she also had buried her husband and was going through a difficult time, and good old likable Bernie just slid right on in there and started befriending her. Tell us a little bit about Marjorie. I know she was a wealthy widow. Her husband had passed, and I called her an heiress, and really I just mean she inherited her husband's wealth when he died. But they weren't just friends. They were like inseparable companions. So this was in, I guess, right around the same time, 1990, that they became friends.
Yeah, definitely. Well, he went over to her house to take her, some tea and to sit with and just check on her. I think that's nice when people do that. But at first, she wasn't having it. She was kind of, if you think Steel Magnolias and think Weezer Boudreaux, all right, think that times 10. Okay, because she was kind of crotchety and cranky, but not always. She had a soft side to her.
She was
too.
Unhappy, I'm sure.
I think
and
so.
Hurting.
Yeah, she was, and she was a businesswoman. She was hard rolling. She didn't play around. She didn't need all the frou-frou. Now, all the other ladies probably were like, "Oh yeah, I would like to have tea with you." I'd be that lady.
Oh, for sure.
I'd be like, "Come on in, let's talk.
Let's braid each other's hair." Right.
And that's what happened.
If I had to need a braid, right? If it was long enough. Yeah.
Funny you say that, because it's kind of how that went. And so then he just kept showing up, and I think she loved his persistence because everybody else avoided her.
They don't. That's another thing about grief. People don't really know what to say oftentimes.
Yeah,
and it's understandable. I'm myself. I put myself in that same position, but it is. You don't want to feel like you have the plague either, and everybody's avoiding you because they're uncomfortable with what they know you're going through.
Exactly. Well, grief is so hard to navigate, and you're right. We do say some dumb stuff sometimes, but in our grief share class at church, we would talk about that and would say, "What do you wish people knew about grief?" And they would say, "I wish they knew it was okay to say my loved one's name." Because everybody's dancing around it. And I figure there's always that bunch that knows what to say all the time about everything. I don't know where they live or who they are. I want to be one of them.
I'm right here.
Okay,
no, I'm just kidding.
You are pretty good at that stuff. You are pretty good at that. Then there's the bunch that goes, "Oh God, I'm gonna cross the street because I don't want to have to say anything to them. I don't know what to say." Then there's the bunch that I love too. The bunch that just says the wrongest stuff in the world.
I love them the most.
I know,
really.
but they're trying.
Yeah, exactly.
It's what I look
at. The intention of doing good is there.
Right. But a lot of people bristle at that and go, "Can you believe they told me this?" They were trying. To me, the hardest bunch is the ones that will walk the other way to not see you.
Right. I know, because you feel like, well, gosh, this is so, I don't think it's contagious.
Right. Exactly.
My heartbreak.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it sure does hurt. And then, but Bernie, he just kept coming back. Well, he worked at the funeral home still. Well, she saw how helpful he was to her. And Marjorie, like I said, she's a little bit difficult. She had one son named Dr. Rod, and he was a pathologist in, let's just say, one of the bigger cities in Texas. And she had disowned him for some reason. He probably didn't do everything she wanted him to. She was tough to get along with sometimes. And she had some grandchildren, but she had kind of pushed them away. Well, she and Bernie would travel with her. They would go to plays, they'd go to Europe, they'd go to Egypt, they'd go all over the world. He took her to a lot of places. They'd go get mani-pedis, but at the same time, she thought over time, he just morphed into her manservant. Basically, she would have him clipping her fingernails or going out to get the paper, which that's all fine and good, but not to the point of having any gratitude, almost like barking beck and call. And what I didn't mention about Bernie in the beginning is when he was younger and going through all his hard time with his parents dying when he was young, that he had an uncle that molested him.
Oh, no.
And that is very important in his history.
I will say so.
Right. Because he really didn't know what to do. And I think he was drawn toward the funeral industry because it's quiet. There's not all that chaos going on. And he was smart. So he learned a lot of things, and he could make people happy. So Marjorie, she just saw how much more efficient her life was. He did her taxes. He did her hair. He put her pills in her bottles, almost like what a very attentive, loving spouse would do. And people would go, is or is it ain't? Romantic, and I don't think it was, but I think they both got the best benefit out of it.
Absolutely. Well, and he certainly did, because I understand at some point, I think in 1991, she altered her will so that he would stand to inherit, I think, her entire estate, which was $10 million. And that's nothing to sneeze at this day and age. But 30 years ago, my gosh, that was certainly a lot, and left the son out completely.
And the granddaughters. Well, and also one of the granddaughters, I think, had said, I really think my grandmother's first mistake was purchasing that $30,000 headstone.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot. That was what Bernie sold her, and she wanted to have that for her husband. So I don't, like I said, he didn't come right out and go, it's just money I'm after, whatever. He romanced her like a lover, but I don't think they were.
Right. I think he was more like an employee, because he did end up working for her full time.
Right.
It seemed like within a few years.
Yeah. She had him quit the funeral home, and he loved the funeral home.
That's a shame.
Right.
He probably resented that on some level, maybe, than just being treated like a servant. I wonder if that was an arrangement. As we talk more about this case and see how it unfolds and him murdering her, like at what point did that just suddenly occur to him the day that it happened? Or had he been thinking about it? Had he been building up to this? Did he go into this relationship thinking, I'm going to befriend this lady and she's going to become, my meal ticket when she passes, when I make her pass?
Right, exactly, yeah. Well, I don't think he meant to do that. One never knows, do one? Because he had a home, it was modest and stuff, and he, for all intents and purposes, he was happy and he didn't require a lot, but he sure did enjoy. He liked plays, like he took her to Les Miserables, and he finally got her in church. Everybody's like, look at old Bernie, he got old Marge in church, So, I mean, it was all that kind of
for that
good
town,
stuff.
that would be a big deal. I mean, especially she was known to be sort of a difficult lady. Well, on that note, let's take a quick pause. This is the part of the show where we like to recognize our advertiser and supporter, Zarsaur Law. We are certainly thankful for the work that they do in our community, protecting the rights of personal injury victims. And we want to tell you a little bit about a victory that they had. And this is no small feat, but this was just announced on July 12th. So that was just a couple of days ago from when we're recording now. But this is a case that went on for 4 years, and this trial just recently ended. And essentially here in Escambia County, which is where Pensacola is located in the panhandle of Florida, the jury returned a $50 million verdict against Progressive Management of America employee James Craig Schultz. Now, let me tell you what happened. Basically, this was a senior apartment complex in Pensacola, and back in 2020, Mr. David Saldana, he was a tenant there at that apartment complex, a licensed physical therapist. He worked at a local hospital. He was shot 6 times by his neighbor, a woman named Uganda Bushbaum, and essentially, she had made unwanted advances towards him, sexual advances. He had rejected her. She was unhappy. She had a history, according to this lawsuit, of repeatedly demanding and making false accusations when she didn't get her way. And so she rejected him, told him she had a gift for him. He came to the door, he rejected her, made her mad. And she told him she had a gift for him. So he comes to her door and she shoots him 6 times. Ooh. And he survived, thankfully, but he's had major surgeries. It certainly left him with permanent physical disabilities, not to mention post-traumatic stress disorder. And on top of it, adding insult to injury, she had filed a false police report claiming that he assaulted her. So when police respond basically to find him there unconscious, shot, she's saying, he tried to assault me. He woke up in the hospital handcuffed to his bed. Oh, no. Facing like all these charges. So eventually, through the good hard work of the Escambia Sheriff's Office, they realized that these accusations weren't true. She starts to, I think she'd even filed that against him before she shot him, but she kept up the story after it happened, trying to say almost like implying she did it in self-defense. But long story short, the apartment manager, that Mr. Schultz, he had known of her tendency to make these false reports. He knew she had been a problem tenant. She knew that this particular victim, Saldana, had not wanted to have anything to do with her, yet they had a special relationship, according to the lawsuit, Schultz and Bushbaum, and he encouraged her to file this false report. He didn't immediately come clean to the police, and that he was aware that she was a problem, and he ended up putting her right next door to Mr. Saldana. So essentially, the bigger issue with this story too, and this is something that I've covered extensively in my other reports, not necessarily on this podcast, but just in my reporting for the Pensacola News Journal and other outlets, there are companies that will come in, and this is an example of one. Sometimes they're owned by hedge funds, sometimes they're American companies, sometimes they're conglomerates from another country, which is what this one is. This is a foreign-owned company that come in, they buy these apartment complexes, and they just run them on a shoestring budget. And it's hard to find a good apartment complex manager is what I'm finding. And especially with either lower income or assisted subsidized housing, you're dealing with all kinds of people with all kinds of complaints all the time. So in essence, they ran it on a shoestring budget. They were aware that this particular manager had issues before, and they did nothing. So in essence, this $50 million verdict, essentially they initially offered to settle for just $350,000. So this $50 million verdict is a financial win for the victim, who's going to be facing these injuries for the rest of his life and dealing with the consequences and repercussions. And it's also a way of holding this company accountable for not doing a better job of running a safe place for people to live.
Well, I mean, like, after you get told, you do have a duty to do something, but we do what works for us, whether we're a person or corporation, until someone goes along, well, okay, keep doing that. Here's a $50 million slap.
Exactly.
Enjoy.
Yeah. So we want to thank Joe Zarsaur for being the lead attorney on that case and fighting for the rights of victims like Mr. Saldana. And I hope that he certainly recovers and finds some justice in this verdict too. And we thank you so much, Zarsaur Law, for being a supporter of the show on Gulf Coast Confidential, where we also like to advocate for victims.
Definitely. Awesome. And on Tuesday, go down to Joe's place and get a freezy snowball. It's becoming a thing down there.
It is. And I think he's only got a couple more plans. So you got to take advantage of it while you can.
It's a thing.
Well, getting back to Mr. Tiede, and we were discussing basically how he had given up his job at the funeral home. He was now working full time for our Mr. Dragon, our Mrs. Dragon Lady, I should say.
Please, sir.
So at any rate, so people were wondering what kind of a relationship did they have? Was it romantic? Was it friendship? And, I think for the most part, we're all in agreement that it was friendship. But then one day her accountant's looking for her and can't find her.
Right. Well, nobody can. People have been trying to talk to her for months and months and months. And the family kind of had, and they were worried. And the accountant, nobody else was looking for Marjorie, nobody. So, but Bernie, here he is walking around with the ex-husband's $12,000 Rolex, and he had a house that she had bought him, and some cars and a plane and all kind of stuff.
She bought him a plane?
Yeah, he loved to fly. Yeah, he learned to fly. She enhanced his world. He enhanced hers. But we got to also remember, we got some childhood stuff hanging around back here with Bernie, and we got some personality situations with Marjorie, but it could have worked out good. And then we got family stuff we know nothing about over here, So he basically, people are looking, so that daggum accountant, he keeps coming to the house, and Bernie goes, she's not here, because she has been missing, okay? And the family's calling, so he kind of estranged people from her. But what people did not know is, in this time being where she was missing, is that he and Marjorie had gotten into, she didn't, I don't think she knew she got in a little tiff with him. She just kept barking at him and on, and nothing was right. It was just over and over and over and over. And he must have snapped. And he picked up a rifle and he shot her in the back 4 times.
Good Lord. I will say so. One time is like, I've snapped. 4 times, I don't know. I guess a snap can last 4 times, but that just seems a certain level of, I'm going to do it again, I'm going to do it again, I'm going to do it again. Whatever he snapped on, there was a big vat of anger to pull from.
Yeah, and I think people like that have been, going over stuff in their head, or going, I effing hate you, you keep on doing this to me, and I don't like this anymore. Or he could have left many different times. He had money, he had power of attorney over her, and he had a house. He had means to leave, but he just kept staying in there. I guess he was used to always finishing stuff. And I think sometimes people, when they get in that crazy thinking, it may be 5 or 10 seconds of crazy thinking. They feel so much power and like a relief or a release. And so, but the second that he did it, he knew he was wrong. And so...
But he didn't call the police.
No.
He didn't confess right away.
No.
He didn't go in there and say, I lost it. I killed this benefactor of mine. Our relationship has come to a deadly end. No, he stuck her in the freezer. He basically folded her body up to a certain extent, right?
Right. Well, and not before he prepared her body. He prepared her body.
Was that a one mortician, last
here's
sort
what
of farewell?
This is his effed up thinking. All right. He prepared her body and did everything in the world because he was going to have a proper funeral later. So that's why he put her in the freezer. Yeah, that's why I told him to put her in the freezer there, and nobody knew. So during these 9 months is when everybody was crawling around, not everybody, but the bookkeeper, the accountant, and some family members and stuff. So at a certain point, her son, Dr. Rod, he and I think one of his daughters came up to the house and said, I want to see my mother.
Right, like 9 months later.
Mm-hmm, right. And so they're walking around the house, and the prosecutor there, and in this movie with Bernie, we got Shirley MacLaine playing Weezer.
I love it so much.
And it's great casting. And we got Jack Black being Bernie Tiede, and then we got the handsome, sexy Matthew McConaughey playing Buck Davidson, the
It is a Texas role, isn't it? That's perfect.
It is. It is awesome. And so even old Buck's like, what's going on? Something ain't right here. So the sheriff department and them, they get to looking all around the house, and then they see the freezer. And Miss Marjorie Nugent was a child of the Depression, so she did not waste anything. So the granddaughter and the son, I think, came to the conclusion that if there's food in that freezer, it'll be able to tell us one way or another if she's here or if she isn't. Or we can look in her refrigerator and see if things are put up, because she will waste nothing, even though she had $10 million. So they go in there and open the freezer and move a few things around, and there is Marjorie Nugent.
Wow. Well, that was good investigating on their part.
Yes. But I think they had been kept away, and during something like this, families can do some crazy stuff by alienating other family members. And I think that's the cruelest thing people can do, because if they're in charge and keeping family members away, that right there, and you have to fight so hard to have the normal privileges and rights, because here's Bernie standing there with the power of attorney and going, I told you people to get out of here.
Right. I will say that's very much true in my own personal experience, and then in the many cases that I've covered, just everything from allegations of abuse at private faith-based schools to individual cases of domestic violence. Sometimes it's hard to see when you're the victim in the situation, but anytime anybody tries to isolate you, whether it's an institution, an organization, or an individual, that is a big red flag.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And it lasts for years and years and years. I know it from experience with my family. There are people that are no damn good in the process, too.
Yes.
And what I've dealt with, some attorneys, some guardian ad litem's, some bookkeepers, some judges, plenty of them. And, you still have to, in your mind, go, I'm not letting my foot up off of that. But you're standing in the middle of grief going, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe professional people act like this, but they do.
They absolutely do. And whatever preconceived notions you may have of the criminal justice system or of any kind of justice system, any kind of organization, you better just put that out the window, because they're not always going to follow the rules, or they're going to do the bare basics and tell you that they've followed the rules, or that they're doing what's right. But really, they're doing what's easy or what's convenient for them.
Right. And I never think of myself as a person that looks at everybody and goes, oh, you Joe Lunchbox or payday and quitting time or whatever. But what I've learned as I've gotten older is there are a lot of people like that. And it's just still incredulous to me after dealing with people like that. I'm like, how can you not see this? Or how can you not care? Is what gets in my mind.
I know. It's payday and quitting time. And for these people, it's something that leaves a permanent mark for the rest of their lives.
Right.
They've lost their loved ones through a violent and heinous act. Well, in this case, it looks like he didn't have to have a lot of pressure before he cracked and confessed.
He wrote a handwritten note of confession. And I think that's what sealed the deal with it being first degree, because it seemed like it was premeditated. And what does premeditation mean anyway? Like
you thought about it, planned it out, I guess.
But for how long? I thought about it for a nanosecond.
Right. I agree with you about that. I think I don't know that there is necessarily a time limit. It's just more, were you of sound mind? Did you have a chance to change your mind? Was it just a moment of passion, or could you have made a different decision and walked away?
Right. And all those are very good things to think about. And I could see how people could argue them either way. But I just think about that. I think about this lady, and she didn't just start treating you that way that day.
Right.
That's the day you snapped. But what I think about with people is they're like, I didn't have any other choice. Yes, you did. You have a home, a 2-story home she got you, down the street. Nice clothes, nice jewelry, nice this, that, and the other. But in the end, none of that matters. I mean, if that was so miserable, get out of it. Life's too short.
Well, in some ways, it's almost like, I feel like with so many of these cases that we cover where people do have options, they're just more difficult. They're going to have to give up a relationship, give up money, give up comfort, give up a lifestyle. Whatever they're gaining from the relationship, it seems as though they'd rather put up with the abuse or the bad, whatever that's happening, and not have to give up the good that's happening.
Right.
But I think in this case, it seems like, too, when people are like that, but they don't have the, I don't want to say self-esteem, or maybe they have mental health issues that keep them from being able to see that there's another way out, or perhaps just focus on the selfishness of, I just want what I want, or I'm going to push down what I feel until I can't hold it back anymore, and then I make a terrible decision.
Right. And I mean, after a certain point, we have to quit blaming people for everything.
That's it in a nutshell. That goes back to, Adam and Eve. Do you take responsibility? Do you not take responsibility?
Right. Or Cain and Abel.
Right.
Like, I don't like how you're acting, or I don't like that God likes you better than me, so I'll just kill you, and that'll put me right up there. All this stupid thinking, But at a certain point, he could have walked away. And I think that's why the verdict was the verdict.
So yes, he confessed, and Bernie was sentenced for first-degree murder, sentenced to 50 years in prison, but he did appeal. And when the appellate court ruled that there was sufficient evidence for the jury to have found premeditation, which was a condition of the charge. So after the movie came out in 2011, an attorney, Jodi Cole, saw it, and she became interested in Bernie's case, and she filed a post-conviction writ of habeas corpus, basically saying that his constitutional rights were violated in the first trial because there had been new evidence discovered, and also apparently that Marjorie was controlling, and that he was had been emotionally abused by her, and it triggered him, and he murdered her in a dissociative state resulting from years of sexual abuse by the uncle, which is what you had referred to earlier. So of course the court takes another look at it, and we'll pick it up from there.
Right. And then the Jodi Cole jumping in there. It was after the Bernie movie. Like you said, the guy that was the producer, director of the movie, his last name is Linklater, almost like Linklater. And he was so fascinated by Bernie Tiede, and so was Jack Black. Jack Black went and he visited him because he said, when I play someone that's living, I go visit them. And they all fell in love with him. And when Bernie was out from 2014 to 2016 for his, we're going to retry you later and do the resentencing later, he lived in Linklater's garage apartment where his house was, and they hung out together and stuff. And I mean, these people love them some Bernie Tiede.
Yeah, he was very likable. Well, it's interesting. We were talking about how he may have isolated her. In this particular case, Jodi was saying that she isolated him by encouraging him to leave his job, isolating him from his friends and family, and that basically that contributed to her emotional abuse of him.
Yeah, that uncle thing keeps popping up in there. And they keep going back to the part where his parents, and then his mom in the accident, and the dad, by feeling so much guilt and drinking, they painted it as it was more awful than we know, I think, is why they're saying that. And then that let this uncle guy in here. So they were saying when she got on him and would not quit, being Marjorie, just kept belittling him and basically possessing him, that's when he said, I've had it. Basically, he didn't say that, but that's what he did.
And when he did confess, it's not like the whole town rallied behind her and was like, well, this is terrible. We don't love you anymore. We don't like you, despite all the years that we thought you were somebody and something else. They were split up over it, according to the local paper and the people in the town and all the coverage. Like, they were just really, well, yeah, she was difficult and he was so nice and maybe he did snap and because we like you. But, that is just not how the law works.
Right.
The law doesn't say, well, you broke the law, but we like you, so we're going to let you have a pass, because it's supposed to be applied equitably to everyone. And her life mattered too.
It did.
He did have the choice to walk away.
Exactly. And we cannot forget the victims. And the court of public opinion, though, kind of works like that. It's like, but he's so nice, though.
Right.
But he's so innocuous, though. And I mean, he even did a lot of social work, too, when he was in that middle part there, and right after she had passed away, he bought people cars. He paid for one couple's house. He had plenty of scholarships. He helped with a certain wing of the Methodist Church. So, I mean, like, people are like, I can forget some of this. Let me look at you sideways and see if you can't be good to me.
Well, and I'm not going to name any particulars, but we've covered cases like that close to home where the people that are accused and charged are high profile. They're well known. They're well known in their communities, in their churches, and their work and their businesses. And people will be lit up on both sides of the fence. They'll be lit up like you pretended to be something you weren't. I'm angry about it. Or they'll light you up and be like, what are you doing talking about them? We love them. They love Jesus. You must be the devil.
Right.
You know?
And the way I feel about that is if someone's in a quandary like that and you support them, knock yourself out. Go support them because they probably do need a lot of support. But don't attack other people for having their opinions and who they support. I mean, you get that a lot.
Oh, boy. Yeah, no, that is the truth. That'll have to be a whole episode another time.
Doesn't it? I know. It is your whole life. You know?
It is. It truly is. But yeah, I thought this was an interesting quote. This is from the Longview News Journal, just talking about how split people were over this. It said, quote, people remember Bernie as being real nice and doing nice things, and they'd like my office to go real easy on him. And then there's a group that wants no mercy, end quote. So that comes from the prosecution's office. That was Panola County District Attorney Danny Buck Davison. Is that the character that Matthew McConaughey plays? That's wonderful.
And he said he would have gone easier on him had he known some of this stuff before, you know. But, I mean, he is truly Texan, too, though. He's like, nope. Texas does not play.
I know. My mama grew up in Texas. I have family in Texas. They were all originally from Arkansas, but none of them play, really.
Yeah, none of them. But this case was so interesting because you can look at that and go, here's the sweetest person in the world doing the ugliest thing you can ever do, which is kill somebody.
I know. But it also goes to show you, too, that I think, and this is maybe big picture observation, but, you know, we read so many headlines, whether it's about politicians or celebrities or people that we don't know that aren't in our regular life, and they get accused of something heinous like this. Let's just say like P. Diddy. I clearly don't know Sean Puffy Combs, but, you know, he's just got tried for sex trafficking and contributing to prostitution, and he wasn't found guilty on the bigger charges, but on the lesser ones. But everybody had an opinion, and it's easy to have an opinion when you're just reading about somebody that you don't know or that you haven't interacted with. But when there's something that happens in your town where you know both the victim and the perpetrator, you really do begin to realize, and I think this is also a gift, in my opinion, that journalists get the opportunity to see. We may not know people, but we get the opportunity to meet the victim's family. We get the opportunity to meet the prosecutors and the defense. And maybe sometimes you're just showing up at one story and getting to know that for a minute. But in this case, this happened in their town and they knew them. And when you know somebody or know about somebody or have had some kind of a either professional or personal interaction, you can't help but see the shades of gray. And I'm not saying that's that way for everybody. I'm not saying that we should all cut a murderer some slack or feel sorry for a victim if they brought something on themselves. I'm just saying there's always more to it. It's rarely ever black and white, unless it's cases of child sexual abuse. And then I'm not going to, I don't cut any slack. But at the same time, I do understand that a lot of those perpetrators also experience that abuse as well. So my point being, there is a reason that people do the things that they do, even if we don't agree with it and don't like it. And when we know them, it tends to color our opinion of what they did.
And make no mistake, Miss Marjorie Nugent is the victim in this Bernie story, and her family. And what I think is so wonderful is that her family has kind of set up, I don't know if it's on Facebook, but it's on social media, a in memory page, sort of like I've done for my sister, because it's a way to put the things. Because they basically said, my grandmother wasn't like that. She might have been, you know, people in business, especially if it's a woman and you hard rolling a little bit, you get called all kind of stuff.
Right. But if she had been a man, she would have been a baller. She would have been large and in charge, you know, Marge, really, literally.
Yeah. But I think that was just how that was looked at too. And in the South, look how many things that she did, and then he took her money and did that. But anyway, her and her family are the victims.
Yeah, he won't be eligible for parole until he's 71. But I did see where her son filed a wrongful death lawsuit against him, saying that he'd embezzled like more than $3 million. I don't know the result of that suit, but I certainly don't blame him. And to your point, they're trying to say, hey, we can't excuse what you did. We can't overlook all the crimes that you did. And it's not even about the money. It's about justice for her and how he took advantage of her. if that's the case.
Yeah, definitely an interesting story.
So even though he is still serving time in prison, he has not lost his charm. Apparently, he got attacked by inmates not long after he entered the Texas Department of Criminal Justice in 1999. But true to form, Bernie turned it all around. And what, literally they're all singing in the choir?
Yeah, he's kind of helped him with the choir there and teaching him about health and stuff. I mean, he's just smart. I don't think he's a manly man, but I think he can teach folks stuff.
Pam, thank you so much for breaking down this case for us. This has been an interesting one. I'm glad I got to know a little bit more about it.
You're welcome.
Awesome. I don't like any of that. That sounded stupid. All right.
Okay.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Well, Pam, thank you so much for being with us on the show today.
You're welcome.
And we thank you so much for joining us. That is it for good old Bernie Tiede, Mortician Extraordinaire, made millions from makeup to murder. We appreciate you joining us. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher, Pam Hill. And a big thanks, as always, to our director, editor, and production engineer, James Roy. And remember, you can listen to more of our Gulf Coast Confidential conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And you can also watch right on our YouTube channel. Just don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. This episode is brought to you by Zarsaur Law.